begin today by reading something which summarizes in the form of an allegory the essence of what we've been talking about, touching upon the ground of unity that sustains and supports all external manifestations of life. Sometimes I think it is given to the poet and to a certain kind of literary dreamer to give expression to insights that defy the more rational analysis, either the philosopher or the theologian. And this is written by a South African woman of English background, and her name is Olive Schreiner. Her period is 1855 to 1921. A man cried up to God, and God sent down an angel to help him. And the angel came back and said to God, I cannot help that man. And God said, how is it with him? And the angel said, he cries out continually that someone has injured him, and he would forgive him, and he cannot do it. God said, what have you done for him? The angel said, I've done everything. I took him by the hand, and I said, look, when other men speak ill of that man, do you speak well of him? Secretly, in ways he shall not know, serve him. If you have anything you value, share it with him, so serving him you would at last come to feel possession in him, and you will forgive him. And the man said, I'll do it. Afterwards, as I passed by in the dark of night, I heard one crying out, I have done all. It helps nothing. My speaking well of him helps me not at all. If I share my heart's blood with him, is the burning within me less? I cannot forgive. I cannot forgive. O God, I cannot forgive. I said to him, look back on all your past. See from your childhood all smallness, all indirectness that has been yours. Look well at it. And in its light, do you not see every man your brother? He looked and he said, yes, you're right. I too have failed. I forgive my fellow. Go, I am satisfied. I have forgiven. And he laid him down peacefully and folded his hands on his breast. And I thought it was well with him, but scarcely had my wings rustled and I turned to come up here, when I heard one crying out on earth again, I cannot forgive. I cannot forgive. O God, God, I cannot forgive. It is better to die than to hate. I cannot forgive. I cannot do it. And I went and stood outside his door in the dark, and I heard him cry, I have not sinned so, not so. If I have torn my fellow's flesh ever so little, I have kneeled down and kissed the wound with my mouth till it was healed. I have not willed that any soul should be lost through hate of me. If they have but fancied that I wronged them, I have lain down on the ground before them that they might tread on me, and so, seeing my humiliation, forgive and not be lost through hating me. They have not cared that my soul should be lost. They have not willed to save me. They have not tried that I should forgive them. I said to him, be thou content then. Do not forgive. Forget this soul and its injury. Go on your way. In the next world, perhaps, he cried, go from me. You understand nothing. What is the next world to me? I'm lost now, today. I cannot see the sunlight shine. The dust is in my throat. The sand is in my eyes. Go from me. You know nothing. Oh, once again, before I die, to see that the world is beautiful. Oh, God, God, I cannot live and not love. I cannot live and hate. Oh, God, God, God. So I left him crying, and I came back up here. And God said, this man's soul must be saved. And the angel said, how? And God said, you go down and save it. And the angel said, what more shall I do? Then God bent down and whispered in the angel's ear. And the angel spread out its wings and went down to earth. The angel went down and found the man with the bitter heart and took him by the hand and led him to a certain spot. And now follow this. Now the man wist not where it was the angel would take him, nor what he would show him there. And when they came, the angel shaded the man's eyes with his wing, and when he moved it, the man saw somewhat on the earth before them. For God had given it to that angel to unclothe the human soul, to take from it all those outward attributes of form and color and age and sex, whereby one man is known from among his fellows and is marked off from the rest. And the soul lay bare before them, bare as a man turning his eye inwards beholds himself. They saw its past, its childhood, the tiny life with the dew upon it. They saw its youth when the dew was melting and the creature raised its mouth to drink from a cup too large for it. And they saw how the water spilt. They saw its hopes that were never realized. They saw its hours of intellectual blindness, men call sin. They saw its hours of all radiating insight, which men call righteousness. They saw its hour of strength when it leaped to its feet crying, I am omnipotent. Its hour of weakness when it fell to the earth and grasped dust only. They saw what it might have been but never would be. And the man bent forward. And the angel said, what is it? And he answered, it is I, it is myself. And he went forward as if he would have lain his heart against it, but the angel held him back and covered his eyes. Now God had given power to the angel further to unclothe that soul, to take from it all those outward attributes of time and place and circumstance, whereby the individual life is marked off from the life of the whole. Again the angel uncovered the man's eyes, and he looked. He saw before him that which in its tiny drop reflects the whole universe. He saw that which marks within itself the step of the furthest star and tells how the crystal grows underground where no eye has seen it. That which is where the germ in the egg stirs, which moves the outstretched fingers of the little newborn babe and keeps the leaves of the trees pointing upward, which moves where the jellyfish sail alone on the sunny seas, and is where the lichens form on the mountain rock. And the man looked, and the angel touched him. But the man bowed his head and shuddered. He whispered, "It is God." And the angel recovered the man's eyes, and when he uncovered them, there was someone walking from them a little way off. For the angel had reclothed the soul in his outward form and vesture, and the man knew who it was. And the angel said, "Do you know him?" And the man said, "Oh yes, I know him." And he looked after the figure. And the angel said, "Have you forgiven him?" But the man said, "How beautiful my brother is." And the angel looked into the man's eyes, and he faded his own face with his wing from the light. He laughed softly and went up to God. But the men were together on the earth. And before we start our discussion, the point at which we stopped yesterday, do you have any question to raise about the creative encounter? Have you found it?
Yes.
Or is it still lost in the bookstore? All right. There's a saying that comes from some part of the Old Testament, allegedly. But it is this, that if Israel is not saved, Jacob will not lose his reward. So, there it is. Now, I'd like to begin by giving you one reference, a book which, if you're interested in pursuing our search, which obviously can hardly be done in 3 weeks, there is a book written by a Catholic priest which represents, from my point of view, the best composite of the generic interpretation of mysticism with authentic source quotations. It is called Varieties of Mystic Religion by Father Elmer O'Brian. Varieties of Mystic Religion by Father Elmer O'Brian. It's a Holt Rinehart publication, published in 1964, and it sells for $7.50. Now, at the close of our discussion, we were dealing with the fact that it is the mystic's insight that what he experiences, which gives to him a sense of encounter with that which is ultimate, and if he be a certain kind of religious man, he will label that ultimate by calling it God. And I was suggesting to you that this element of which the mystic speaks is regarded by him and by many other people who think deeply on the subject as that which is essentially the givenness of God. It is, to use a figure, it is an increment which is basic, structural, to his very life, his very essence. It isn't something that he achieves initially, but it is something that is given. It is a manifest of the Creator in the creature. And all that he, the mystic, feels under necessity to do is to establish primary contact with this given increment which is inherent in him. In one sense, then, he shares this as a part of creation. It is the signature of the Creator that is inherent in his consciousness. He may realize it by becoming aware of it, or its awareness may be forced upon him in some sudden moment of illumination. Or he may live, a man may live his entire life without becoming other than vaguely aware of the fact that there are moments when he seems to be so much more than what he is at any given time. There are various names by which this is given. Sometimes there are those who feel that a man becomes aware of this at a moment of inspiration, for instance, which gives to whatever the problem of his mind may be an illumination. What the Orthodox, what originally the Quakers referred to following the leadership or the guidance of George Fox, the inner light which lighteth every man that cometh into the world, picking up a phrase or an intimation from the fourth gospel, the Gospel of John, that this light, this inner light, is a part of the givenness of God, and that it is not only present in human life, but it is a part of the totality of the experience of all living things. And indeed, there are some people who say, who not only include among living things that have specific consciousness, like cats, dogs, snakes, mice, flies, but that every living thing, trees, flowers, you may have read a year or two ago, it was rather popularized in many magazines, about the man in New York, whose name I don't remember, but he's the man who developed the polygraph machine. And in his experiments, he discovered that if he attached the wires of the polygraph machine to the plants in his office, that the machine would register emotions in the plant that were identical or their reaction to emotions that were in the man himself. And he received a great deal of publicity about it. And an enterprising newspaper reporter came to check it out, so he gave him a dry run. He said, now my associate in the office can't stand these plants. Every time I go away for any length of time, he refuses to water them, he forgets to water them, and there's a wall of hostility that is generated in this office between him and the plants. He said, now I'll test it out for you. So he attached the wires to the plants, and then he buzzed, and his associate came in the office, and as soon as he appeared in the door, the indicator went up like that. I've experimented a little with this myself. When I lived in San Francisco before, I had about 20 roses in our backyard, and they were having a hard time to live because in the area of San Francisco where our home was located, there were only about 2 hours of sunshine on a day of sunshine. And night did not ever quite come off because the lights of the city would the fog would reflect the lights, and you could stand in the backyard just as if it were a brightly lighted moonlit evening. So I developed the habit of going out before I retired in the evening. If I did not come in until 1 o'clock, 2 o'clock, whatever time it was, before I went to bed, I went out to have a little conversation with my roses. And I would say to them, now I understand what a hard time you're having because you don't get enough sunlight, and it's never dark, and living things must have darkness as contrasted with light, so that certain things that can happen to them in growth can only happen in the darkness, and you don't have that. And there are rumors going around in the garden about your cousins in Portland, where the roses are as large as saucers, and I don't want you to get an inferiority complex about this. So please know that I believe in you, and I know you're doing the best you can. Just squeeze as much energy out of the available sources as possible and do the best you can. And whenever I had a blossom, I would very carefully give to them a little paean of praise for the fact that they had finally made it. It didn't look like much, but it represented the best that they could do. And I know that of all the yards in our general neighborhood, I had the kind of roses blooming in our garden that were not to be found in the rest of the neighborhood. Now this may be, you see, just a fiction in my mind. I don't know. I don't know where the reality is, but I do know that before I started doing this, they were very, I was full of compassion for them. But after I started doing it, they stood on their own feet, and a rose was a rose, and it helped. In other words, what I'm saying is that there are some who go even beyond the notion that this givenness is a part of the basic residue, the ground, in all living things. Whether or not this is true. No, that's wrong. Whether or not it is a fact can be challenged, but perhaps the truth of it remains untouched. Because the mystic affirms this sort of experience, that the ultimate is within reach of every living thing. It is not merely in reach of every living thing, but it is inherent in every living thing. This has exposed the mystic who affirms this to the accusation or the judgment that can best be expressed by a term with which you're familiar, namely pantheism, which seems to suggest, as an inference from this, that everything is God, and God is everything. This is the rather severe judgment that is passed upon this point of view. Now, I do not think, in technical terms, that the accusation is valid, because it is the attitude, this attitude towards all living things, that suggests that everything that is living is in some very real sense sacramental. That the presence of the givenness of the Creator in his creation makes of the object of creation a sacrament. A sacrament because it carries within itself the signature of the ultimate, the signature of the Creator. But the mystic doesn't stop there. There's a second thing that follows, and that is that there is always the assumption, and more than the assumption, the insistence that it is possible to cultivate this givenness. That it can be, the sphere of its influence in the common life can be enlarged, that it can grow, not in quality, but in the area that it covers in the life. Back of this second assumption is the whole exercise that is characteristic of the mystic endeavor that we call spiritual exercise. And what is the aim of the spiritual exercise, as you will see if we have time before we're through? The aim of the spiritual exercise is to widen the sphere of influence, how to say this, to widen the area of awareness in the individual of this presence. That even though it is a part of the givenness, the influence of it, the spread of it, if I may use that term, the spread of it is related to the way in which the individual puts himself at the disposal of it. That there is a way by which this consciousness can grow and become more and more central and fontal in the life of the individual. The result of this feeling, notion, idea, experience is that almost always the mystic has for himself a pattern of behavior that is constantly being refined, tested, the fulfillment of which, or the exercise of which, gives to him a sense that this presence, this mark, this sign, this imprimatur, whatever word you want to use, this givenness of the Creator is in him. So that when he begins to work at it, each man discovers what for him are the most effective disciplines. And they call them, in the Roman Catholic tradition, for instance, they're called spiritual exercises. But the curious thing to bear in mind is that with the possible exception of Meister Eckhart, about whom we will spend our last times together, no mystic insists that there is a necessitous relationship between the spiritual exercise and the result. Now this is very important, this is crucial. Let me say it again. That given the function or the significance of the exercises, the means by which the individual seeks to widen, to enlarge his awareness of the presence of God in him. The exercises are very important, very critical, very crucial, and I think necessitous. But there is no guarantee inherent or implicit in the exercises themselves which says that if I do this and this and this, God will come, or my awareness of God will increase. For there is assumed that the movement of the Creator, the movement of God in his creation, has an element in it that is arbitrary. And this is this bristles with difficulties. If I can follow the prescription that has been tested by those who have gone this way, who have made this journey, then I ought to therefore be able to receive what they receive. But if by any activity on my part I can bend the will of the Creator, then it puts the Creator at the disposal not only of my needs, but of my whims. And there's something very heady about that. If I know that I can follow a certain path, the following of which will guarantee that at a point along the way, that which I seek will be available to me. There is no guarantee. This is important emphasis. But if I don't do it, then I may miss it. So the problem always is, am I following the right path? And by right in this sense, am I following the path that will lead me to the goal? Or is it possible for me to find out from within myself, from the limited awareness that I have, can I find out from that experience what I need to do in order to enlarge the area of the sphere of its influence on my life? Now such questions as these are never quite resolved. One of the great formal steps along the path is a word that you will encounter in your reading, if you do any, and that word is detachment. Detachment. And this is the point at which the whole concept of detachment becomes relevant to the mystic's quest. For as paradoxical or contradictory as it sounds, as it seems, if we start out saying, you see, that the whole world is resonance with God, with the Creator, then this includes all of my sense data, all of the reflective processes of mind, that I may knock at any door of my senses and find, when the door opens, that I have this blessing, this enlarged awareness of the Creator that's in me. So that great systems have grown up around this. For instance, one of the great words in a man like Eckhart is detachment, and he's a radical in this regard. He says that if I am able ever to rid myself of creatureliness, then automatically God fills me up. So that his insistence is that all the time I must disengage myself from all of the delusions of my senses. I must not become so engrossed in the sense data which is mine that I lose the scent of the eternal. This is inherent, for instance, in all of the notions which have to do with aestheticism, with the laceration of the body, with the effort to rid oneself of stain of any sort. In Christianity, the man perhaps who's had the greatest influence in this insistence is St. Augustine. You may recognize this at once. For coming as he did out of another system of thought, having the experience that the thing that had tormented him all of his days, that had been responsible for so much of his private and personal agony, was the battle which he had with his own body. That the flesh, all of the sense experience, which for him not only were sense experiences, but were sensual experiences, that these were things which stood between him and actualizing the presence that was in him. And he felt that in so doing he was following the experience of St. Paul, who in the 7th chapter of Romans talks about the flesh and how wretched he was, and how the dichotomy between the flesh and the spirit was so great that the flesh represented that which in essence was a betrayal of the spirit. So this dualism, this conflict, turns up particularly in Christianity in the most extraordinary way. But back of it, and the thing that I'm insisting upon at this preliminary stage is that detachment becomes an important vehicle for ridding oneself of the things that divide, that separate, that keep the individual from being constantly and fundamentally aware of the presence of God, or if you want to say ground, in himself. And to betray that means that one turns his back on that which is in him, the presence of the Creator. Now, how sound this is another question. I don't know what your reaction would be to it. That the sense data, that the body blocks the free flowing